to APDA Conversations. I'm Dave Grosby, and it is truly a pleasure to visit with our next guest in this series we're running for Parkinson's Awareness Month. He is basically responsible for one of the most iconic brands of the 20th century, continues on to the 21st century. It is a pleasure to welcome the founder of Espn, Bill Rasmussen. Bill, how are you doing today?
Just great, Dave. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. We're recording this obviously during the whole COVID thing. How are you handling things?
Pretty good. We have a long hallway in the house, so I walk up and down that a lot. And I get out and walk around the neighborhood and keep doing, really basically doing the same things from a Parkinson's point of view that I was before. A lot of exercise and trying to get some sleep and stay healthy. And, you know, carry on business as usual. My business as usual has always been kind of unusual, as you probably would guess, but still cooking, as they say.
That's great to hear. Let's talk a little bit about the whole startup thing. I mean, it amazes me. You're 46 years old. We're going back to 1978, I believe.
Yep.
Prior communications director of the Hartford Whalers, or the New England Whalers, I think they were called at the time.
Yep.
And you make the leap to saying, you know what, I'm going to start a all sports cable network, even though there was no such thing. I mean, I'm just wondering where this came from, where your motivation came from, where this idea came from.
Well, it's rather interesting, Dave. We, you know, cable television in 1978 was still really a small chunk of the viewership in the United States, probably fewer than 12 million, maybe 12.5 million households. In this day and age where we talk hundreds of millions, that was really small. And Connecticut only had 5 active cable franchises and 5 unactive that hadn't even started yet. And the University of Connecticut, as you well know, has always had solid basketball program, both men's and women's. And so we had been trying to do some things for the Whalers and without much success. And when I got fired, I thought, well, let me go out and talk to the University of Connecticut. And I thought we could put something together with, you know, landlines in Connecticut with those 5 cable systems. And in the process, I was talking to a VP at United Cable, and he said, you know, I don't know much about this thing. It's called a satellite. Somebody, RCA, has put this satellite up there, and I don't really know much, but I have a phone number. I'll give it to you if you want to call and talk to the guy if you think it's worth anything. Well, when you've just been fired, somebody says, here's an idea. Why don't you give this guy a call? I picked up the phone and called him. Told him what we had in mind, and I was startled. He said, where are you in Connecticut? You know, I thought I was wondering if I'd even get through to anybody to talk to at RCA. But back then, you know, they had ladies or gentlemen answering the phone, and they would say, yes, sir, hang on a minute, I'll get you. They didn't know who I was calling. So I asked for this one gentleman and came on the line. And when I told him where I was, he said, I'll be up tomorrow morning. Now I was really intrigued. And so I couldn't wait for the next morning. My son, Scott, and I, we got down there for the meeting at the United Cable office. The gentleman was kind enough to host us. And we went through a bunch of things, and he was talking about buying 2 hours a day or, you know, to do Connecticut, or 3 hours at night or whatever. And then he said, we have one other, he said, I don't know if this will mean anything to you. We have one other plan. We've offered it. Nobody's ever bought it, and but it's approved, and we just don't talk about it much, but it's 24 hours a day. It'll cost you $34,167 a month, but it's yours for 5 years. Now, at this point, mind you, I've just been fired, and I don't have $34,167 a month. But that's okay. You know, he told us all about it. My son said he's a statistics guy. You may have seen he's a pollster as well. You may have seen his name in polls. But anyway, he said that can't be right. He told us, because we had heard about 5 hours a day, 2 hours in the afternoon, 3 hours at night, whatever it might be. And my son says that can't be right, because it was only like $1,100 for the whole day on that basis. And so Al Parinello is the gentleman's name from RCA. He looked and he said, those are the numbers. And we said, well, thank you. We'll take what you said and talk soon. As soon as he left, we said, can you believe that? We could have everybody across the country. We would get everybody for $1,100. Wow. Okay. Next morning, we picked up the phone, called him, said, Al, I'm going to take one of those things. And I still remember, and I kid when I'm talking to a group, I go, one of those things. Like he could see, he couldn't see. He said, one of what things? I said, one of those those 24-hour things. He said, you mean a transponder on the satellite? Yeah, I said, that's what I mean. That's that $34,000 thing that you talked about? Yeah. And his answer was, you will?
Wow.
We had no idea what we were going to do, but we figured, well, let's take Connecticut National. And then after, obviously, it didn't take long before we said we need a lot of programming to fill 24 hours a day. And in a series of events between getting fired on Memorial Day up to August 16th, my daughter's birthday, Scott and I were driving down to New Jersey where she was working that summer to celebrate her birthday with her. And we were talking about what we were going to do. And we came up with the idea, we've got to talk to the NCAA. And it turned out there's a whole series of, if it had been something else, it might not have happened.
Right.
But John Toner, the athletic director at the University of Connecticut, was about to become the president of the NCAA. They have an athletic director. It used to be Bill Flynn from Boston College. Different athletic directors have high-profile programs. And he said, you know what you have to do? You have to talk to the NCAA, but start with the TV committee. Bo Coppage, Captain Coppage at Navy, is the chairman. He said, I can arrange, a phone call. I'll tell him to accept your phone call when you call. So I did, and I called him. This was in August now. I mean, we've gone all the way. I've been out of a job since Memorial Day, but we're now up to August. Amazingly enough, Navy was scheduled to play at UConn in a scheduled quirk. UConn never hosts big games like that, but they were scheduled that year in 1978. So I got Bo on the phone, he was Captain Coppage to me then, of course. And he said, yeah, we're going to be up there. We're going to, play John's team. He said, we're going to stay at, then he told me what hotel they were staying at and what motel. And he said, why don't you come on over about 10 in the morning at game day and we'll talk about some things and tell me what your idea is. And so I told him, and he said, you got to come to Kansas City. Our next meeting, a TV meeting, is October 15th. And if you're there, we'll give you all the time you want to sell the program. So it's that fast it happened. All of a sudden I was in front of the TV committee, and I'm now Bo and Walter and, Walter Byers and all these guys that were icons. Darrell Royal was on that committee. Trying to think of some of the other people there. These were all names that we all knew. And of course, the first reaction was what everybody said in those days about television, the same thing they had said about radio. We don't want to get too much of that because people won't come out to, you've heard this before, they won't come to the game if they can hear it or see it. And of course, it worked just the opposite. And the lead person that turned out, the real advocate for us, was Darrell Royal. And he liked the idea, and he said, we have nothing to lose. And if it takes off, it's going to be big. He was right. It's really big today.
It's almost beyond big. I'm just, a little background on it. You've been in television before.
Oh, yeah.
You're, as we pointed out, you've gotten fired. This has got to take a tremendous leap of faith and a tremendous amount of confidence in kind of flowing through this thing. Where do you think that came from for you?
Well, I think it came from really the time that I was born. I was born in 1932, and in what's the so-called silent generation.
Right.
We basically, our parents were struggling to put food on the table, and eventually, World War II happened, and I was in the 4th grade on Pearl Harbor Day. And so I was aware, by that time you're aware of what's happening, and my father, a lot of people lost their jobs in the 1930s. He was among them. And then the war came along and everybody was working. But it was basically, we'll make sure you get enough food on your plate. Eat everything. Don't ever waste anything. It was almost like an order. Take what you need, but that's it. And then he was always talking about, this is America, we can do anything, He said, I'm going to find another job and I'm going to do this, hang on, I should have put that on.
No problem.
And that we were always taught to be courteous, to be curious, and to try things, but to treat people right. And that's just kind of the way that 1930s group from 25 to roughly 45, we were kind of right in the middle of it. That's the way we grew up, with respect for other people and so on. and that we can do anything in America. We can talk about anything, and we can accomplish anything. Just don't do anything illegal, obviously.
Right.
And so that's the way it all started, and that's how I got into the radio business to start with. When I finally finished college and the Air Force and those other things that came along the way, I got out of the Air Force. We ended up working at Westinghouse and started a small company that it was a clever idea at the time. Whatever you give us, we'll take care of it, and it'll be out and on its way to where it has to be in 24 hours. They said, "Oh, you can't do that." Well, we did it. That company stayed around for 50 years and employed from time to time as many as 150 people. We did it all with part-time people, the predominance of which were women, because they stay-at-home moms with kids in school. While the kids were in school, they let them work well, and that was successful with my look, I'm 30, I'm going to retire, I'm going to get into the business. And what I want you, I'll give you all my stock, and I just want you to pay me for 3 years, and it's all yours. And if I make it, I make it. If I don't, I don't. So they agreed. And of course, the company stayed around for 50 years and was very, very successful. I went off and got in the radio business and went from radio to television in 2 years. And that was 1965. I started in television. So that's, wow, Dave, that's 55 years ago.
Yeah.
1960, I started in TV in Springfield, Massachusetts. So one thing led to another, and here we are.
Here we are, indeed. We're having a PD conversation with Bill Rasmussen. Let's talk about the Parkinson's aspect of your life. How did it enter your life? How did you find out?
Well, it was about probably 8 or 10 years ago that my general practitioner, I had what seemed to be a little, twitch with the left finger. And he said, well, I don't think it's anything too serious. He says, there's something called an essential tremor. We'll keep an eye on it and see if it gets worse. Well, it did get a little bit worse. And so I finally went to a neurologist, and he finally diagnosed in 2014 that I had that. And I didn't know what it meant, really. I had never really thought very much about. I've been a pretty healthy guy, basically. And so he said, well, what's going to happen is, the tremors will increase. You may have trouble walking. You may have trouble doing this, but let's go through some therapy sessions and see where we go. And then we'll get some medication and make it, make you as comfortable and as curable, I guess, as possible. No cure, as we all know, but think positive. And so I just kept the same positive attitude that I've had from early in going to school and the Air Force and business afterwards, and said, okay, let's just attack it. And where are we going to go from here? And I've continued to speak to college campuses and businesses around the country. And oddly enough, here I am. I can't do that forever, obviously. And I'm sure not liking missing this whole year where all the campuses are closed, can't do anything.
Right.
But I'm a very optimistic guy. I try to keep my brain thinking about things, and so far it seems to be working. I exercise every day, do a lot of leg massage work for circulation in the lower legs, walk every day. And I think positive attitude helps just as much as all the rest of it. But I put the package together, and we'll see.
What's the most
I'm sorry, go ahead.
What's the most challenging aspect of it for you?
The most challenging, well, right now, and even before this, and this is why the APDA here in Seattle has been so great, not being able to get out and travel and meet people the way I always used to do. I was always involved in some project that would be around people. I'm a people person. Not being able to, especially now during this pandemic era time, it's very difficult. I think the most difficult thing is the change in that what would you call this? The social aspect of life where you can, just get in a normal 20 years ago, hey, Dave, what are you doing after work? Let's go. You'd just go off because, we might talk about a Seahawks game or this or that, or we might talk about something totally different. But you can't, neither one of us can do that now because we can't go out anywhere. It's kind of crazy.
Oh, it's completely crazy. It's one of those challenges. And you mentioned walking, and we're both going to be involved in the walk coming up. But, that's what I find to be the best exercise of all is just getting out there and walking as much as anything. And it sounds like it's the same thing for you too.
It is. And amazingly enough, there are enough small kids in the neighborhood here where my family lives that I think I have said hello to more small kids than I have since we had small kids. There's a little 2-year-old up at the corner, and a new family moved in, and I was going around and I just waved to everybody, hi and how are you? And this little girl started a little dance step, a little shuffle. And so I stopped and I said, are you dancing? And she kind of nodded her head and I said, well, I can dance. And so I did the same thing that she did and she repeated it. So that's the height of my activity and excitement these days, walking around the neighborhood and talking to people. But it really, I love to get out in the fresh air and walk, and I exercise even when walking, arms and whatever I can stretch. I try to do those things. But, I want to get back. We're going to have another virtual meeting tomorrow morning with some other people that we've met through the press program with here in Seattle with APDA. And it'll be good to see everyone, just like it is you and I talking now. But, there's still something missing of the personal touch. It's great to be in the same room with a person and have conversations. But we'll get through it.
And I saw you this morning online because we were both at one of the APDA's sponsorship on pain management. And you talked about the press program. It's interesting to me to see how people want to deal with it. I mean, some people want to have as much information as they possibly can. Others just want to have some information and kind of deal with it as it comes. You strike me as the kind of person that wants to have as much information as you can before you attack something. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. As a matter of fact, I mentioned I saw my neurologist by coincidence yesterday. And I had met someone. Are you familiar with Sports Business Journal? It's published in, of course you would be. What am I saying? One of the writers, I was back around the Espn anniversary, and last September I made a tour of all of the Espn, not all, but Charlotte and Bristol and New York and Los Angeles and different things. And a fellow in Charlotte for Sports Business Journal came up to me and he said, I've really been wanting to talk to you and ask you a question. And I thought, is this going to be about the 1964 World Series, or who knew what it would be? He said, I have Parkinson's and I'm reluctant to begin taking any medication whatsoever. He's 50 years old. He has early onset Parkinson's.
Right.
And he said, somebody told me that once you start taking medication, you will die within 7 years.
Wow.
And I said, how does this misinformation get out there? That isn't, Michael J. Fox is what? He's been living with it for 30 years.
Yeah.
And, but things like that just don't make sense to me. And so that kind of got me interested in, can we use the power of ESPN to help introduce some really good information to people who are afraid to even go to a doctor to talk about it.
And that's people that have it.
Yeah. How many people have Parkinson's that are embarrassed and they don't want to talk about it, or they're embarrassed, they don't want to go to the doctor? I happen to think it's a mistake. Let's go and attack it is my attitude, and obviously yours as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the thing that I find frustrating, and a lot of people do as well, is I always describe myself as my Parkinson's, because everyone's is different. I mean, that's
exactly
one of the things that going into it, I mean, I knew about Michael J. Fox. I knew about Muhammad Ali. My mother had it, unfortunately, and had some of the similar characteristics. But, there was so much that I found out about it. And that was one thing that is different for everyone.
Yep, it sure is. And it's interesting you said what you just did. My mother had it as well. And of course, Ali was probably the most visible of anybody among the athletes. And I had the good fortune to spend some time with him on his way to the Liston fight in Maine many, many years ago. And also I saw him probably 15 years ago in New York, and when his Parkinson's was really advanced. But he didn't seem to be concerned. He was very personable, and he began to have trouble talking, as you're probably aware, later in life. But I don't think there's any shame or any reason that somebody shouldn't say, I've got it, let's go solve it. If you have a cold and you take 3 cold pills or a throat lozenge, that's fine. Well, that's not exactly what you can do with Parkinson's, but you go do it. And I think that's the biggest disappointment to me when I see people, and I wonder, I don't say anything unless anyone would ask me, but I would say that they should all go and find out what, it may work, it may not. But to go through and say, I'm kind of embarrassed and I've got a shaking hand, or I've got some symptom, and it's not anything anybody can hide. So why not face it head on? That's been my theory.
All right, I got a question to ask you. You've probably been asked a million times back on the topic of your career. How did you come up with the name?
Well, this is interesting. I thought this would be really clever, right? I've been fired, and we finally get to that point where we're going to have to do something. And we actually incorporated on Bastille Day, July 14th, 1978. So it didn't take as long to go from getting fired to doing it. And I thought, well, okay, by the time we decided to do that, this is going to be all sports. Why don't we talk about the Sports Programming Network? How would that be? SPN, because it networks, everybody thought about CBS, ABC, NBC. And so I said, okay, SPN. Come to find out, fellow in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who did work with Ted Turner, and I got to know him very well eventually worked with him for a year and a half, had already taken those 3 letters for the Satellite Programming Network.
Okay.
So we're watching television in Connecticut, just as viewers, and the Connecticut Natural Gas Company introduced a program, an energy-saving program for their customers. Didn't mean anything to me because at that time, I guess we had moved to Connecticut by then. But they had a graphic with the letters ESPN going around the earth. And it just kept, it was a,
wow.
I don't know how familiar you are back in 50 years ago, animation like that cost a ton of money.
Oh, yeah.
Very difficult to do, not like we can do today. So I called the agency that handled it, and I talked to one of the 3 partners. And it was a small agency, and I told them what I'd like to do. I said, I'd like to have that graphic. We won't say anything. We don't want the video, the audio, of course. Is there any way you can get permission? He said, well, I'll let you know. Next morning, and he said, I'll let you know with one caveat. If I can get that for you, I want to work for you. So he called me the next morning and he said, when do I start? That was the way I found out that we could have this. So we put together a graphic and we took that to the cable show eventually in Las Vegas in April of 1979. And although we had already been working on doing this and talking to various cable operators, that's the first time it was introduced publicly. And we had ESP, and our logo on the cards at that thing was ESP Network Inc. And the printer said, that's the dumbest name I've ever seen. He said, we're just going to cut this down and make it ESPN. So we came up with Entertainment and Sports Programming Network because we had to have something for the E. We said, well, it'll be entertaining. So we just did that. But we took it out to the cable company. We had one little 10 by 10 booth. You know how they have at all those exhibitions at big conventions. We were way at the end, and we had this big crowd down there around. We had one TV set, and we played that loop over and over and over again. And people would come up and say, what are you going to do? We're going to do sports 24 hours a day. Really? What kind of sports can you do 24 hours? Whatever sports are played, we're going to do them. Well, if you recall the beginning days of ESPN,
I remember.
We had some really interesting sports. We had Irish hurling on, I think, 4 times a day. We had pool events. We had all kinds of things. People came to us to sell us rights. How much would you give me for this? How much? One guy came up and he was positive we would want to give him a rights fee for New York rooftop tennis.
Holy cow.
What are you going to give me? And we said nothing. He's the only guy we ever turned down. I couldn't imagine New York rooftop tennis, whatever, how would they do that, man? I guess somebody plays up there.
I suppose.
There are so many stories, David. It's a miracle of the way it all folded together. Like you mentioned, we talked about earlier, the Rca Satellite. Unknown to us, they had launched that satellite in December of 1975, and here we are in 1978. It was still half empty. They couldn't figure out a way to get people to buy those empty channels. So when we suggested 24-hour sports, they became a big advocate because they said, well, we're going to help you now because we want you to be helping. Basically, we'll trigger other people to buy the other channels. And of course, it didn't take long, and Espn and got their satellite, and Ted Turner, CNN came along, and one after another, and RCA sold it out. It was done after we made that announcement in July, when we finally put everything together with the RCA salesman, told them we're going to do 24-hour sports as of August 16th. They went public with it and said, this is what the future holds. And before the end of September, all 11 were gone. So the other 11, we had ours, and the other 11 were gone, and it's grown since then. Obviously, they've launched more satellites, and now there are more satellites than the world knows about up there, I think. But it's crazy stuff, but wonderful stuff.
Last question for you. ESPN obviously has opened a lot of doors for you over the years, and you've had a chance to meet a lot of interesting people. It's probably an unfair question, but is there someone who stands out as the most interesting person you've managed to run across over the years?
Well, we mentioned one because I got to interview him and spend like an hour with him one-on-one back in 1965, Ali. But I have met a lot of folks and got to play golf with George H.W. Bush, and that was a great afternoon playing with him. I put my foot in my mouth on the first green on that one. I guess because he's a president, he used one of those long putters.
Right.
Which is fine. And he's got, on the first hole, he's got like 3.5, 4 feet to go, and he's standing there swinging the putter, waiting for somebody to give it to him, I think. And after he did it, he looked around and he looked at me, and I said, Mr. President, presidential privilege only goes so far, putt. And he backed off and he cracked up. And that was one of the most enjoyable rounds of golf I've ever had. And that was fun. But I've had the good fortune to meet and play with. I've played a round of golf with Gary Player and Lee Trevino, Bob Murphy, lots of folks. But as far as as I think back, being a baseball fan, it's an incidental charity game. The Whalers used to have a softball team, and if a charity wanted to raise some money, with names like Gordie Howe and some of the others, if you can get him in a Sunday afternoon softball game, 2,000 or 3,000 people would show up and they'd do some things. Well, this one group in West Hartford brought up 3 people. We never knew who was going to be there. We would just go play the Whalers. As long as Gordie was showing up, everybody would show up,
Right.
And just we're finishing in, throwing the ball around the infield in the first inning, and I noticed out the corner of my eye, I'm playing third base, and a guy is walking toward me, and I'm thinking, what's the instant thought, what's somebody walking on the field? And I turn to look, and he's holding his hand out, and he says, "Hi, I'm Joe DiMaggio."
Holy cow.
That was pretty amazing. And then the other 2 people that came with him were Mel Allen, who was doing the PA for the game, and I had listened to him.
How about that?
Yeah. How about that? Yeah. And then when he's announcing the lineup, and he said, the next for the, the whatever the charity team was called, from the New York and San Francisco Giants and current New York Mets, number 24, Willie Mays.
Wow.
So here I've got Joe DiMaggio to my right, coaching in the third base coaching box, and I'm looking at Willie Mays. who has just been announced by Mel Allen. That's like the trifecta. And then I started thinking, I better move back a little bit. And the shortstop moved, everybody moved back. But Willie Mays still hit it over the left fielder's head. He laughed all the way around bases, you know. But that's the one thing about sports that I think so many people can enjoy. It doesn't make any difference. Male, female, young, old, rich, poor, you know, northeast, southwest. If you're a fan of X, whatever X might be, it might be here in Seattle, we have Seahawks fans. In New York, fans argue over the Mets and Yankees. I remember when they used to argue over the Dodgers and Yankees. I mean, it's just the way it is. And that's why sports have always been really, I think, at the center of my life all the way through, even when I had to work in an office for a few years. But it's all been pretty good along the way, and I'm happy that I've been involved in it. And it's kind of fun to go back and see the campus now in Bristol that started off as a 1 acre plot on a reclamation area, a reclaimed land area. And now it's 123 acres. And they have got more satellite communication capability in Bristol, Connecticut than probably any place in the world short of the United States government. It's just amazing.
You surprised they stayed there all these years?
Well, it's interesting. When we hired Chet Simmons as the president, he was leaving NBC and he became the president. First thing they wanted to do was move it. However, it's very inexpensive to operate a business on land in Connecticut, a lot more inexpensive than trying to rent space in New York. And by the very nature of having a lot of satellites, needing a lot of space, you really couldn't be in a major metropolitan area. They have a huge office in New York.
Sure, now, yeah.
No question. Then another in Los Angeles. They're everywhere. But the main distribution center is from Bristol. Even Disney has, last figure I heard, they have 3,000 Disney people working in Bristol. That must be a real shock for somebody who came from California to go to Bristol, Connecticut. But it's just been amazing to watch it grow. They've bought whole streets from the city, but they're the biggest taxpayer in the city of Bristol too. Like more than the next 50 combined is what someone told me at one point. I don't know if that's true, but
probably still is.
They're a really good corporate citizen of the community. They built playgrounds and daycare centers and really got themselves very comfortable in Bristol, and Connecticut appreciates them. And it's kind of fun to watch, and it's kind of fun to look back and think about those things. And there's always an interest in sports.
Well,
as you well know, I mean,
you betcha, man. I'm proudly wearing the colors right now. I don't know if you can.
There you go.
It's been a real pleasure having you on APDA Conversations, APDA Northwest. I'm of course sorry that you have Parkinson's, but also grateful that you're here and bringing your energy to bear on the problem, and we'll get after it together.
We will indeed, Dave. And I plan to be here for 100, to hit 100. How about you? You're going to join me?
I'm going to do my best.
Let's go for it. We'll do it. Thanks, Dave. Really enjoyed chatting, and see you soon.
Absolutely, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you.